I had never seen anything like it, and for a few seconds my brain rejected the obvious reality in front of me. My trailer was stopped on the shoulder, aligned, clean, intact, with the mechanical brake engaged and no sign of dragging. I was almost 50 meters ahead, driving only the cab, unaware that I had lost half the trailer. The shoulder was dark, silent, and the only thing that shone was the strange seal hanging on the side of the trailer, attached where there shouldn't be a second attachment. The texture and shape were completely different from mine. It was as if someone had removed my real seal, put theirs on, and given me back a trailer that wasn't exactly the same one I was towing when I left the gas station. I put the car in reverse and slowly approached the cab, trying to understand how I hadn't felt anything. An accidental uncoupling would never leave the trailer in such a perfect state. And even if, by some miracle, that had happened, I would have felt the jolt, the weight disappearing, the different behavior on the road. None of that occurred. This could only mean one thing. Someone performed the maneuver on their own, with the precision of someone who works with trucks all the time, and did it all in less than 3 minutes on the road. This type of work requires 2 people, maybe 3, each with a defined role. It wasn't a common robbery. It was an execution. I calmly got out of the cab, trying to keep a cool head. I observed the truck from a distance, analyzing every detail. The bodywork looked the same, but there were small signs of recent handling. Glove marks on the metal, a slight scratch on the edge where someone had placed a tool, displaced dust near the lower latches. The rear door was aligned, but the side rubber had pressure marks that weren't there before. It was a clear sign that the door had been opened and closed by hurried but experienced hands. My original seal was no longer there. They had replaced it with another one bearing a strange code, written with permanent marker on the metal. I knew I couldn't open the door. If the cargo had been tampered with, any violation on my part would create legal implications that wouldn't fall on whoever made the switch but on me. I would be the face, the document, the owner of the signature on the manifest. That's how truck drivers ended up losing their freedom without having done anything. That team wanted it to look like I was involved. The precision of the operation showed that. Someone was constructing a story where I was responsible for something I didn't yet understand. While I was looking around, I noticed recent tire tracks on the shoulder, parallel and fresh as if a pickup truck had stopped there for a few minutes. The tread pattern was that of a common utility vehicle, without any customization. This showed intelligence. Only an idiot uses flashy tires for crime. They parked behind my trailer, turned off the lights, quickly opened the door, put something on or took something off, resealed it, hitched the trailer to the support point, and left it there as if it were a trailer with mechanical problems. All this while, I thought I was simply picking up speed to get into the fast lane. The only thing I knew was that if I hitched the trailer and continued driving as if nothing had happened, I would be exactly on the path they wanted. I needed to understand what they had done, but without opening the door and without leaving a trace. I looked at the seal again. It wasn't an industrial company seal. It was a seal used by an organized group, different from the common models, shorter, more rigid, with a reinforced locking tip. The type of seal used when the contents cannot be tampered with until they reach specific hands. It was a silent code. The message was there. An experienced truck driver learns to recognize patterns on the road. The type of car that follows you, the type of people who show up at the gas station, the type of service that seems too good to be true. All of that becomes instinct. And my instinct told me that if they removed something from my cargo, then I was free. But if they added something, the situation was much worse. The difference between a robbery and forced transport is simple. In a robbery, they leave. In forced transport, they continue watching you. This meant that someone could be waiting for me to hitch up the trailer and drive down the highway. I took a deep breath and surveyed the surrounding terrain. The road was empty. The moon illuminated the shoulder just enough for me to see the metallic glint of the tampered seal. The only way to know if they were near would be to silently observe the reflection on the horizon. Truck drivers learn to see movement even when they aren't looking directly, and I saw it. In the distance, a slight oscillation in the darkness, like the diffuse glow of headlights off but the engine running. I couldn't see a shape, but I could feel their presence. I grabbed my phone and checked the route logs. The time the tow truck first disappeared didn't coincide with any official stop. This meant they did everything while I was moving, probably at low speed, taking advantage of a slow uphill climb where the truck is more vulnerable. The timing was perfect. They knew my route, they knew my pace, and they knew exactly where I would be every minute. I returned to the cab and sat with my hands on the steering wheel for long seconds. I needed to make an irreversible decision. If I hitched the trailer, I would be playing their game. If I abandoned the trailer, I would be putting my career at risk. But there was a third option, risky but real. I could tow for a short distance and then veer off to a place where I had control. An elevated area, with open terrain, where I could assess my surroundings without them approaching unseen. I carefully hitched up the trailer, but before returning to the road, I walked to the side and touched the metal near the latch. The heat there was different, higher, as if something inside had been handled recently. The temperature wasn't that of a normal load. It was a sign of human handling, not engine operation. Whatever it was, it had been put on or removed minutes before. That kind of sensation clung to my skin. As soon as I got back on the road, I kept my low beams on and drove for a little over 15 minutes before turning onto an alternate route used by those transporting agricultural equipment. It was a little used road, but with wide stretches, a gentle slope, and access to an area where old antennas still offered some peripheral vision. I stopped the truck in an open area, turned off the engine, and observed. The horizon confirmed what I feared. Distant, almost invisible lights slowly approaching. They were following me. I took the tampered seal, photographed it, and kept it. I needed this proof because what I was about to do could be used against me. I walked to the back door, touched the rubber seal, and smelled a faint scent of solvent, something used to clean fingerprints or remove stickers. That explained the heat. They had handled it too quickly and left residue. It was all I needed to confirm it wasn't paranoia. Before the distant headlights got too close, I did the only safe thing. I removed my secondary tracker, the one almost nobody knows exists, and hid it in the vegetation a few meters from the road. If they were looking for me, they would track the truck. But if I needed to prove that I was forced to abandon the cargo, that would be my silent alibi. A truck driver who works alone has to think like that. I got back in the truck, put it in gear, and steered the vehicle to a point where the road curved blindly. I stopped there with the trailer blocking the road, making access difficult. I knew I didn't have time to dismantle the tampering, nor to find out what they had put inside the cargo. But I did have time to do one thing: force them to reveal their intentions. Nothing reveals a criminal more than their behavior when faced with resistance. The headlights finally appeared around the bend. It was a large pickup truck, without stickers, without identification, with tinted windows and a slightly raised suspension. The type of vehicle used by those who need to pick up and remove cargo without leaving witnesses. They stopped almost 30 meters away without advancing. That said a lot. People in a hurry pull over. People who are afraid wait. That silence confirmed that they didn't want a confrontation. They wanted me to deliver the trailer alone. I left the engine running and watched their every move. There was no attempt to approach, no sign of a weapon, no sound of a door opening. They were waiting. This showed me their weakness. Whatever was inside that truck needed to arrive somewhere intact. They couldn't risk damaging or losing what they had put in there. That empowered me. Without turning off the engine, I pulled the trailer a few meters to the side of the road, aligning it to a point where the ground was soft, sloping, and unstable. There, any sudden movement could damage the cargo. They noticed immediately. The pickup truck showed signs of restlessness, slight movement inside, and changes in the position of the headlights. They couldn't risk me dropping the cargo, so they kept their distance. And that's when I made the final decision. I uncoupled the trailer, let it rest completely on the edge of the slope, climbed into the cab, and moved forward slowly, without haste, dodging them as if I were abandoning the scene. The pickup truck didn't follow me. They were only interested in the cargo, not in me. This meant that the tampering wasn't about the truck. It was about the contents. I drove for over an hour in silence until I reached a spot with a gas station, cameras, and activity. I stopped, registered my presence, refueled, and left digital footprints showing I was alone and far from the trailer. I needed to build a documentary trail proving I abandoned the vehicle due to risk, not malicious intent. The next day, my phone rang with a warning from the transport company. They found my truck abandoned and tampered with. The seal was broken, clear signs of adulteration. They opened a case, involved the police, and collected statements. My name appeared as the driver, but the evidence of the seal being changed, the use of solvent, and the abandoned truck's condition ruled out direct suspicion on me. The truck became the subject of a larger investigation. I became just the truck driver who refused to be part of the scheme. Since that night, every time I pull into a gas station and do my routine check, I calmly run my hand over the tow hitch, feeling each latch as if reading a silent message. Not out of fear for the cargo, but out of the certainty that, on the road, the greatest danger is not what you're carrying in the trailer, but what someone tries to put in it without you noticing. If you're enjoying these chilling stories, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any more terrifying tales to come. Now, get ready for another journey down dark and mysterious roads. I had driven on quiet roads before, but nothing compared to the stretch where I discovered that certain trucks don't carry cargo, but rather secrets that shouldn't have been left alive. I only realized this when I noticed that the rear license plate of the semi-abandoned truck in a rest area didn't reflect the light from my headlights. It wasn't lack of maintenance. It was something else. That absent shine seemed to absorb the light, as if the metal had been painted to give nothing back to the world. I drove slowly, and felt that low feeling in my stomach that precedes life-changing situations. I continued my journey, but the air inside the cabin became heavy, as if someone were sitting in the passenger seat breathing deeply, waiting for me to understand what ignoring it would cost. I continued east, the constant engine noise distracting me from the discomfort that clung to the back of my neck. The night was clear, but the desert displayed a kind of darkness that not even the most powerful trucks could completely cut through. When I arrived at the next gas station, I immediately noticed that the truckers who usually stayed there weren't. There were empty tables, machines turned off, and a smell of old frying oil that didn't match the total absence of people. The television was on, but without sound. I grabbed a cold coffee, glanced through the window, and my mind froze for a second. The semi-truck without a reflective license plate, that very one, was parked on the other side of the road. It couldn't be a coincidence. That gas station was too far from the previous one for someone to have moved so quickly without me seeing it in the rearview mirror. I returned to the road, feeling the need to put miles between me and that truck. The cab seemed smaller, as if the space around me had been compressed. A strong wind swept across the highway, battering the metal in long gusts that vibrated like warnings. At each sign, my focus shifted slightly from the asphalt until I noticed something in the oncoming lane. Deep skid marks, too long to be from just one vehicle. It was as if several trucks had braked simultaneously, trying to avoid something they didn't want to hit. And the only thing I could see at the end of those marks was dust kicked up, with no wind strong enough to explain it. As dawn approached, it felt like the semi-truck without a license plate was everywhere at once. When I looked in the side mirror, for a moment I could have sworn I saw that dark container driving without lights, just a silhouette, maintaining perfect alignment against my speed. I blinked, and it disappeared. I took a deep breath, praying it was just tiredness, but the pressure in my chest continued to build as if I were inside a cabin that was shrinking a few centimeters per hour. I crossed a narrow bridge, the kind of passage where the weight of the truck echoes for dozens of meters. At that moment, a metallic noise resonated behind my semi-truck. It wasn't the sound of chains rattling or cargo shifting. It was deeper, as if something had been dragged a few inches from the inside. Nothing moved in the mirror, but I clearly felt that I wasn't just carrying merchandise that day. I kept driving, increasingly tense, until I noticed flashing lights on the shoulder. I thought it was an accident, but when I slowed down, I saw only abandoned cones all lined up like arrows pointing to an empty space where the asphalt was marked by irregular scratches, as if something had been pulled off the road. I continued on, intending to end my shift at the next stop, but fate seemed stubborn. The red light on the dashboard flashed for no reason. The radio produced static, all at the same time. I slowed down, pulled over, and let the engine purr softly while I tried to understand what the truck was trying to tell me. On the other side of the highway, the semi-dark truck reappeared, now much closer than I would have liked. It wasn't parked. It was waiting for me. The feeling was so strong that I automatically unbuckled my seatbelt. I observed the other vehicle with that profound silence that precedes something inevitable. No light inside the cabin, no movement, just that opaque container, as if it were made to keep what was inside completely isolated from the rest of the world. I stared until I felt my own eyes begin to ache, as if its darkness were trying to pull my vision inward. I started the engine forcefully and returned to the road without looking back. The next few kilometers were the worst. The desert seemed to have lost its horizon, and the bright lights of nearby gas stations never appeared. It was as if I were driving through a stretch of road that didn't belong on the map. The GPS froze. The oil temperature rose for no reason. The noises inside the car became more intense, almost rhythmic. With each vibration, I imagined something large, heavy, and restless trying to find a way out. The dim light began to appear repeatedly in the rearview mirror, always at a slightly different distance, as if testing the limits of my fear. I accelerated, but it maintained its rhythm, appearing, disappearing, appearing again. When I finally reached a well-lit stretch of construction, I thought I would find some relief. However, the workers weren't there. The machinery was running, engines idling, but no one was controlling it. It was like rushing into an abandoned site. I squeezed between the cones and noticed a huge mark in the dirt, a deep trail as if something had been pushed off the highway with too much force. The service trucks had their doors open, interior lights on, and documents flying across the ground. That place screamed silence. Minutes later, I saw something that made my pulse race. On the shoulder of the road, there were remnants of a bumper with matte black paint, the same as the semi-trailer's container without a license plate. Next to it, long, straight, deep skid marks. They looked like two parallel lines made by something heavy being pushed against the ground while struggling. I examined it in the rearview mirror and felt that the cab of my truck was darker than before. A shadow occupied the corner where the interior light should illuminate. It wasn't an absence of light. It was the presence of something that didn't want to be seen. I accelerated until the engine protested, but the shadow wouldn't recede. The air grew cold, as if I were driving through a non-existent fog. The highway began to vibrate slightly, not from the asphalt, but from the increasing weight inside my truck. I felt the truck tilt a few degrees, as if something inside was finally finding enough space to crawl. I didn't know what they were carrying before me, but it was clear it wasn't ordinary cargo. I'd carried my entire life on the roads, and I'd never felt my vehicle react as if it were fighting against its own load. When I caught sight of a large arc of lighting coming from a logistics center on the horizon, I thought that would be my escape. Little did I know that this would be the point where the road would stop merely trying to scare me and begin demanding a decision from me. The semi-darkness was behind me again, this time so close that I could see the shadow of the container swallowing part of my own. The road narrowed. The chance to stop vanished. The sound inside my truck became a continuous, deep, determined dragging. And in that instant, I understood. The other truck didn't want to catch up with me. It was guiding the one I was with. I entered the logistics center's yard with my heart racing. The place was too brightly lit for it to be the middle of the night. Gates were up, pallets were on the ground, forklifts were off and unmanned. It was like entering a place that had been evacuated a minute before something happened. I crossed the area to a darker corner and finally braked, feeling the hot air escaping from the engine like a relieved sigh. But the silence didn't bring calm. The rumbling sound inside the truck stopped suddenly, as if whatever was inside knew the journey was over. The semi-dark truck slowly entered the yard, taking its exact position behind me. Aligned as if we were part of the same operation, I understood too late that that night wasn't about pursuit. It was about transfer. Whatever I had brought strapped into my truck wasn't for me. It was for that truck. I climbed out of the cab, my whole body trembling, but knowing I couldn't just stand there waiting for the outcome. I walked to the front of my truck and let the distance between me and the trailer do the talking. There was no way to help, stop, deny, or escape. The only real choice was to get out of the way. The first metal hinge of my rear door gave way with a dry crack that echoed throughout the yard. I didn't look back. I kept walking until the sound of something heavy hitting the ground mingled with the distant rumble of an engine that wasn't mine. Then, I felt the air change. The entire yard seemed lighter, as if an invisible pressure had evaporated. When I finally mustered the courage to look, both trucks had vanished. I was alone in the silent yard, with an empty truck and the feeling that the road had decided to spare me for some reason I would never understand. Since that night, I've learned something no manual teaches. Some cargo belongs to no one, some trucks don't travel official routes, and some shadows only change vehicles when they choose to. And most importantly, that I was lucky. Too lucky to continue driving as before. But I still pass through rest areas where I see marks in the ground, straight and deep, as if something had been dragged there the night before. And every time that happens, I turn off the headlight for a few seconds just so I don't reflect anything that could see me back. In my personnel file at the last transport company I worked for, my name appears twice, once as a driver, and again as evidence of a crime that no one could prove, but that everyone is certain I committed. I know exactly which night my record turned against me. It wasn't during a cinematic heist nor a movie-worthy chase. It was on a regular dry cargo route, crossing stretches of I-40 that I knew by heart, with a truck too ordinary to attract attention, and a freight job that was officially too perfect to be true. The first sign came at the loading point. The cargo was described as various electronic components, high insured value, numbered seal, everything neatly on paper. But the warehouse was quieter than usual. No forklifts going back and forth, no other trucks loading. Just me, my tractor trailer parked at the dock, and three guys I'd never seen before wearing temporary visitor badges. They didn't ask anything, didn't try to be friendly, didn't complain about anything. They loaded the trailer in less than half an hour, sealed the door, handed me the transport document, and disappeared into the warehouse as if they were afraid of appearing on camera. I should have turned around right there, but a well-paid freight at the end of the month is the kind of bait a trucker learns to accept silently. The company's instructions were simple. Leave Oklahoma City, follow I-40 eastbound, spend the night at a specific truck stop in Arkansas, refuel only at a gas station indicated in the contract, and deliver the cargo to Memphis in the morning, to a third-party warehouse. The official justification was route control for insurance purposes. On paper, it made sense. In practice, it was alibi control. As I was leaving the city, one detail began to bother me: the weight. I knew my truck's behavior like an extension of my own body. That box should have been heavy, worth the money the insurance company put in it. But the vehicle responded too lightly on inclines, gained speed too easily on declines. It wasn't a load of electronics distributed on pallets. It was something concentrated, tightly packed, occupying less space than it should. I passed through the first weigh station with my heart more alert than usual. The weight was within the expected range, nothing alarming. But the rear axle showed a few kilos less than I was used to for that configuration. Whoever set that weight in the system knew exactly how much could be missing without drawing attention. The truck was fine on paper, fine on the scale, but wrong in feel. The truck stop where I was supposed to spend the night was on a discreet exit, a place I'd used a few times for a shower and a snack. That night, however, it seemed set up for me. Perfect back-in spot, right in front of the store's security camera. Good lighting on top of the trailer. The gas station attendant already knew my pump number before I even told him. It was as if the entire route was programmed around my truck, not the cargo. While the diesel was filling the tank, I noticed a dark sedan parked in a corner of the parking lot, with two guys inside. They weren't talking to anyone. They weren't getting out, but one of them kept his cell phone pointed in my direction, feigning distraction. I've seen inspectors, highway patrol officers, even insurance investigators on routine operations. That look, however, wasn't the look of someone searching for irregularities. It was the look of someone who needed to register that I was exactly there, at that time, with that truck. I slept poorly, with the feeling of being used without understanding how. I woke up before the alarm, checked the trailer's seal, took a complete walk around checking the tires, hoses, any sign of forced entry. Everything intact. No recent marks, no impact wrench, no forced hinges. The crime, if it existed, wasn't happening back there. It was being written in my diary, in my tachograph, on the gas station's cameras, on the invoice with my name on it. The delivery in Memphis was even stranger. The destination warehouse didn't have the facade of a large company, it wasn't well known, and it didn't have traffic consistent with the insured value of that cargo. A rented warehouse in an industrial zone, a simple gate, a sleepy guard with a clipboard. No sophisticated electronic system, no detailed inventory check. In practice, all it took was someone signing the delivery receipt for the insurance company to understand that everything was perfect. I pulled up to the designated dock, got out, and presented the papers. The checker barely read them. He stamped the receipt, noted the license plate, and told me to wait while the unloading crew came to open the trailer. But nobody came. I stayed there, sitting on the edge of the step, watching the clock tick. 20 minutes turned into 40, then an hour, until the same checker reappeared, now more tense, telling me to continue my journey and let them take care of the rest. Experienced drivers know that phrase is never good. Go ahead, we'll finish here. Usually means someone wants distance between you and what's going to happen next. But I had the signed receipt, the invoice received, the route completed. Officially, my job was over. Unofficially, that's exactly where I stopped being a driver and started being a cog in the machine. 3 days later, the phone rang while I was waiting for another load, this time in a small town in rural Tennessee. It was the company's legal department. A cold, objective voice, asking if I could come to the office as soon as I finished my current route. No explanations, no details. Just the phrase every trucker dreads. It's about that freight you did to Memphis. When I arrived in the meeting room, there were already too many people for it to be a simple affair. A fleet manager, the insurance agent, a lawyer I'd never met, and a representative from some third-party company whose business card simply said, Risk Management Consulting. The conversation started politely, but went downhill as quickly as my name was repeated as if it were a protocol number. They explained that the shipment of electronic components never reached its final destination, that the Memphis warehouse was actually a transit point, that between my departure from the truck stop in Arkansas and the time recorded for delivery, there was a window of time suitable for a gang to seize part of the merchandise, replace the seal, and continue with their plan. None of this appeared on my route, but all of this was possible within the same schedule I followed. The problem is that their plan didn't require me to know anything, only that I obey. And I obeyed. Spend the night at the right gas station, fill up at the right pump, pass through the right way station, park at the right warehouse, except that someone would take care of the rest. My obedience became the perfect skeleton of an alibi for whoever actually stole the cargo. The insurance company claimed there was strong evidence of insider involvement. The warehouse swore it received less volume than stated on the invoices. The transport company, pressured by the loss, needed to show cooperation, and I, who only had the tachograph and my suspicious instinct as defense, became the ideal character to fill the role of the undercover agent, the driver who does everything too right on paper and too wrong in the moment. They started pointing out details. They said I could have questioned the overnight stop, that I could have chosen a different location, that I could have called the company when no one showed up to unload, as if the driver owned the route, as if someone in charge really wanted me to suspect something. In the version they fabricated for the case, my excessive discipline became a sign of prior collusion. When the police got involved, it wasn't like in a movie, with handcuffs snapping on the table. It was worse. It was with silence. The detective called me in for clarifications, asking the same things 1,000 times with different words, cross-referencing toll times with a map of my route, trying to find any loophole that would fit the robbery into my routine. They didn't need to prove I stole anything, they just needed to prove I could have helped, even without appearing on camera. That's when I understood the true mechanics of that crime. They didn't need an accomplice driver. They needed a predictable driver, with a clean record, punctual, and with a documented route. Everything to create a trail of responsibility. If anyone were to contest the incident, the entire structure would point in my direction. Tachograph, GPS, invoice, fuel, truck stop camera, signed receipt. Every piece of evidence that I did everything right was, at the same time, proof that it was possible to steal without taking me out of line. The gang used my routine as camouflage. Somewhere between Arkansas and Memphis, in an area blind to cameras that few people know about. They pulled up a second truck identical to mine, with cloned or very similar license plates. They simulated a technical stop, opened the door of a twin trailer loaded with scrap metal, transferred part of the valuable cargo from my original manifest to this other vehicle, replaced a seal with a falsified number, and let me continue, unaware that I was already driving with half of a phantom freight. The truck stop where I slept served as a stamp of veracity for the story. The images clearly showed my truck intact at night and leaving in the morning with the same visible seal. The gas station confirmed fuel consumption consistent with the distance. The weigh station validated the weight within the margin. Everything else could be manipulated, as long as I continued to do everything according to the manual without improvising. In the end, the investigation couldn't gather enough evidence to formally charge me. I wasn't seen opening doors anywhere, nor making off-route stops, nor showing up with suspicious money in my account. I was too perfect as a disposable part, but still insufficient as an official criminal. They decided to close the case by splitting the losses between the transport company and the insurance company, calling it a claim with suspected but unproven fraud. For the system, it was just another filed case. For me, it was the slow death of my career. No large company today wants a driver mentioned in a report about the theft of high-value cargo. The refusals came politely, citing workforce reorganization, change in hiring profile, delicate economic climate. But I knew how to read the subtext. My record had ceased to be a resume and had become a warning sign. Today I drive a rented truck, doing small freight jobs on routes no one else competes for. Not because I'm afraid of the road. I'm afraid of paperwork, of overly perfect invoices, overly detailed contracts, overly expensive insurance policies, overly selective gas stations. Afraid of becoming just another line in a report. Afraid of discovering, too late, that all my discipline has become a tool for someone to steal with elegance. When I see another driver celebrating an easy freight job with a fixed route and everything paid perfectly by the insurance company, I hold my tongue. I don't get into an argument. I don't play the paranoid veteran. I just look at his tachograph recording every minute of the trip and wonder who's keeping a copy of that record somewhere. Because if there's one thing I learned on that trip to Memphis, it's that the driver is almost never the mastermind behind the crime. Sometimes it's just the perfect alibi.